Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about 8th grade. Middle school movies are kind of unique in that middle school isn't a cool period of anyone's life. No one's like, man, middle school was the best. I don't really get people to say high school is the best, to be honest, either. But middle school especially is full of awkwardness and fear and being scared of almost who you are in front of your peers and being uncomfortable, and your body's changing, not to get too weird, and you have lots of zits, and it just feels like everything that was going on when you were a kid is changing, and it's rapidly horrible, and everyone's cruel to you. And I didn't have the greatest time in middle school. Like and 8th grade captured that so much to me. This was like watching a thriller to me, because I just felt like I was in middle school and it was not comfortable. And I mean that in a good way, I guess. I felt very tense. I felt very scared. There's a scene where she goes to a pool party, which would be literally like if I would have gone to a pool party, which I, unlike her, would have not gone and then acted like that was the cool choice to do, which is not something I totally still do. It taps into kind of an awkwardness of being in middle school, and regardless of, I think I always thought 6th grade was the worst of it, but frankly they picked this film just takes place during this character Kayla, played by Elsie Fisher, who does an amazing job. It's her last week of 8th grade, or her last week of middle school. Sort of by the last week of middle school, everyone in my middle school was sort of like just chill with each other to a certain degree. Although, to be honest, they weren't chill with me, because there was a time I walked up to a party and they're like, no, not you. So I guess never mind. It just felt so real being in it. And sometimes there's certain movies when I feel very real in them, it feels weird even reviewing it, because it's like I almost feel like too personal about it. And this is a film that I felt like I was watching my own personal experience, even though, obviously she's female, and in the modern age and in my day, I think we didn't have any social media. It was like a chat room or AIM. I don't think I really even had when I was in 8th grade. Seeing it through this perspective and seeing 8th grade with Snapchat and Instagram and things like that was really interesting, and in a lot of ways relatable, because obviously I post videos on here. I know what that's like. When I heard the beginning boop, 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 boop noises, that's how I shoot my videos on my laptop. I know people tell me to get a new camera and everything like that. Maybe one day. I don't have a lot of money, I feel the kind of odd awkwardness of posting things online, of still doing it regardless if you have views or not, having this drive to do it, having this kind of need to do these things regardless of. I don't know if I ever felt I did it to project a certain image of myself the way these kids are, so maybe I can't relate to it on that level, but I definitely do know the feeling of putting your all into a post about something and feeling like, this is maybe not necessarily going to be the biggest thing in the world, but is going to go over well, and when it just falls flat or nothing happens, it's defeating. I kind of get that, when she does the whole thing of her in the bed and she makes herself up, woke up like this, and I don't really do selfies, so I guess I can't. Anyway, I guess I thought it related more to me. Now that I'm thinking about it, I guess it doesn't. But it was interesting to see a teen movie that was so good at showing the modern era and the modern era of technology, which is so important to teens, and seeing them all on their phones and things like that. I obviously don't know what modern teens are like at all. I think I know maybe one modern teen or something, so I don't really know. But it never felt that closed off, because I think everyone in most exchanges are awkward. I'm pretty awkward in most situations. I'm very private in real life, and I think this film got into the core of middle school so well, it kind of becomes very relatable and universal in a lot of ways. Some scenes would be more intense than others. Some scenes, I'd feel good. I was like, oh, she has friends now, this is working out, and then it would fall apart, or this would happen, or that would happen, and it just feels so naturally of that time in your life. A film that you kind of have to almost compare it to would be Welcome to the Dollhouse, because that was kind of the previous the middle school movie. That film is darker and, it's Todd Solondz. In some ways, I don't think that film is inaccurate, and obviously more of a product of its time, and 8th grade is more of a product of our current time. So I think they kind of like work in their own 22 years difference, basically, and are saying different things and are obviously by different directors and so forth. I think this film tries to be hopeful, but also not so hopeful. Middle school might suck, but it's like kind of like peering into like, hey, things are about to get better a little bit. I also think it's weird seeing a high school or a middle school movie from someone who's so on the outside. She doesn't really have a group of friends with her all the time. She isn't like dating like the popular guy or something like that. You're really getting like, this is a real slice of life middle school movie, and especially the great performance by Isaiah Fisher, who almost feels like she's just gonna burst into tears at like any time, and I mean that in a good way. Like, I felt like that in middle school. I felt like I just wanted to like run a million miles away from middle school like every day of every second. It was just like awful. And so it's like watching her face, like in those situations I felt it, but watching her face just like dug it into me in such a way that I was just like, I've never really felt the way I did during this film. In fact, it was a little intense. I honestly want to see it again. In fact, I thought about doing that before I reviewed it, just because I felt like it was like overwhelming, those feelings coming back. And she was able to like, just watching her face and watching like when she get into certain situations, I would just be like, oh my God, I know what this is like. This is too much. I did not think I'd have to live through this again. That was horrible. Like, I would see people posting things like, final as well. I'm like, just middle school in general was awful. If you're in middle school, I'm sorry. You have to go through it, I guess, but it is the worst. One person who I think is very good in this is the guy who plays her dad, Josh Hamilton, who is like an underappreciated character actor. Does such a good job as an awkward dad, but knowing the right moments, and like awkwardly, like he doesn't know what's going on. He's trying to be like too opened up, which is always a mistake with younger people. I think people, particularly my age and older, mistake. They're like, what if I'm like really real with you? And that's like the worst thing you can do most of the time. Like, there's only a few times you can play that card, and it is not like 80 to 95% of the time, I would say, which I find, it's like, you're older, you can be open. Kids don't want to be open with adults for the most part. There are certain times you should do that, but he was very good at doing that in the single dad thing. And like, as a parent, I definitely thought he was good at projecting that while also having a sense of normalcy, which I think is something when you get into kind of movie parents, they have to be like, have an amazing speech, which he actually does have, and be like either the best parent or something like that, or a little complicated. He definitely, you feel like there's other stuff going on. He seems like an actual dad, flaws and everything, but he's still like a good dad who raised her by himself. Bo Burnham has never been someone who I knew sort of who he was, but I'd never really been a fan of him or anything. But this is like, he is so cinematic. He's cinematic in ways like he understands his characters, he understands his setting, particularly like how he uses the phones and computers and stuff, how he makes sure like the light looks correct for like the screen light like hitting you and so forth. It looks correct lighting wise. Like, I felt more like I was watching these people like for real in a lot of senses. And the fact that he's able to get into these moments of these kids, and there's only a few times he really does it for laughs. Like, there's this guy who she likes, and like this techno music plays, and that's like just hilarious. It's a really good gag, but there's so much about the awkwardness that I think at the beginning I watched the film, people were laughing a little bit more, but I noticed as the film went on, they weren't laughing as much, because it just honestly feels too uncomfortable and too sad and too like you're kind of in this like shitty popularity awfulness ride and you're not going to get off. And 8th grade, just like, it's different, is it's like a coming of age tale, but it's sort of like a coming of age tale where it's like, it's going to get better in some regards, but it's not in other regards. It's kind of just presenting to you how to get over your nervousness and your awkwardness, and how to come through it, and how to find the way that is actually good for you, not the way that maybe like your desires maybe want, and how that's kind of almost leading you astray, but also the way in which it taps into the middle school experience. It's just something I've never seen before, and maybe something I wasn't entirely ready for. Almost feels too honest, which is not a complaint. Feels too honest in a way that I wanted to look away a lot of the time, and not in that like, oh, it's awkward humor sort of way, in that like this is too real. This is too good at capturing what it's doing. As an experience, as a film you can relate to, it was just like very intense. I will never forget this film. This is like really one of my favorite films I've seen this year, and maybe one of the, if not the best. because it just like taps into something. You have this awkward girl who all the kids feel like kids, very much like kids. Like, you definitely feel like you're there. I felt like they're almost like too awkward and kiddish in a certain way. Like, I understand he wanted to reject the idea that everyone talks like they're in Dawson's Creek or something, but at the same time there's like kind of like maybe more of a middle ground he should have given it. But the way they get into it and the way they talk to one another almost like feels so like these are actually kids, that you kind of like, maybe my experience wasn't his experience necessarily. I liked like everything. Like, I didn't know kids still hung out at the mall, in the Palisades Mall, which is kind of interesting. It is just such a uniquely wonderful, kind of beautiful film about a really awful time in most people's lives, and kind of so naturalistic. I think a lot of people might not understand, what Isley Fisher is doing. I think I can honestly see people just thinking like, she's like the boyhood kid or something. Like, that's just like how she is. But it's so real in a way that's like incredible. Like, she is so good in this. There's so much about this that just like taps into middle school life and life with your parents and life with everything. That is such a smartly made film, because it just is able to present that world so well. Watching it, I was so in it. It felt unreal and something I almost like didn't want as much as I thought this was a great movie. I think 8th grade taps into a part of middle school that, if you've been in middle school, you know how awful it is, but it gets into people and their awkwardness, and how scared you can be, and how nervous you can be, and how crippling that can sometimes be, and how in the social media kind of age, we all look at all the social media and we use it for various things to kind of get us over our awkwardness, maybe to lie about how it's getting over our awkwardness, how we lie about ourselves and so forth, but I think also how we use it to make ourselves more confident, which I definitely think I do. There's so many things like I did, like her thing where she's like burning the box. Like, I did that with my school papers and lots of stuff. Like, you wanted to be free of it. You didn't want it to like be a part of your life anymore. You wanted to move on from it, but you're stuck, and days feel so much longer when you're younger. And you see all the cool kids, you see things just like not progressing, and you're just stuck in this world, and you're stuck with this awkwardness. And as soon as I had so many things like that, like social things I'd try to set up with people that wouldn't work out, or they'd be mean, or they do, there's that scene in the car in this film, one of the most intense scenes I've seen in years. Is just next to, I guess, the Spider-Man Homecoming car scene, that kind of intensity. 8th grade is just an unforgettable, amazing, wonderful movie. And I don't know if I'm describing this accurately. I really wish I could see it again, just to understand it, how it moves and flows. It just feels like it broke some sort of code or something to make it the kind of film it is. It just like gets to reality, and it's like an interesting character piece, a character piece of someone whose character doesn't feel fully formed, but also does feel like a real person of everything they're doing. 8th grade defines the kind of middle school movie. It does it better than anyone's ever attempted to before. Also saying things about teens and kids with social media and everything, and modern kids, but it says so much about being just a person in this life, and like being put into these tense situations and things. But also, I very much think it says a lot about middle school and how rough that period can really be, and it just doesn't let go of how rough and uncompromising all of that is, and how ready to knock people down kids are. And I mean, that's adults too. How hard it feels everything is, how you just want to like kind of tune out from everything, how it never really feels like it will get any more interesting than it is. You'll just be like this awkward person in the corner, and in some ways, like, you still feel like that. 8th grade kind of like gets that kind of awkwardness to a T. I think what Bo Burnham has done is he's really been able to capture something, but he's been able to capture something I almost never really wanted captured, but seeing it on the screen, you have to admire how he's able to present that in such a fantastic and perfect way. It is quite the cinematic achievement, and it's the kind of cinematic achievement that kind of makes you uncomfortable and gives you that reaction, that guttural, real feeling reaction that reminds you of an uncomfortable time so well. It makes these filmmakers kind of just such experts, Bo Burnham especially, at his craft, that he's able to just present this so effectively and so real. This is a movie that, if anything else, feels very real and very authentic, but almost so authentic you really just want to look away even though you never really could because you're so wrapped up within it. I think 8th Grade will just be a movie that I'm going to kind of treasure while at the same time feeling amazingly uncomfortable about the whole thing. And that's really kind of middle school, and 8th Grade managed to capture kind of one of the worst periods of most people's lives, but did it so well you kind of almost have to applaud it. So if you've seen 8th Grade and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. Gucci.